I want you to picture a moment that's probably more familiar than most people like to admit. You open your banking app, and then you close it almost immediately. Not because you saw something shocking, not because anything dramatic happened, but because there's this quiet feeling that shows up the second you think about looking. A kind of resistance. You tell yourself you'll check it later. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe when things feel a little more under control. And somehow, that moment keeps getting pushed forward. Days pass, sometimes weeks. And in the background, there's this low-level awareness that you should know exactly where you stand financially, but you don't. Not clearly, not confidently. So instead, you avoid it. Not completely, just enough to stay slightly disconnected. Just enough to not fully face it. And if you've ever experienced that, even once, you're not alone. Because this behavior isn't random. It's not laziness. It's not a lack of discipline. And it's definitely not because you don't care. It's something much deeper than that. And once you understand it, the whole pattern starts to make a lot more sense. Most people think avoiding their bank account is just a bad habit. Something simple, something they should just fix. But if it were that simple, you would have fixed it already. You don't avoid things that feel neutral. You avoid things that feel uncomfortable. And money, whether people admit it or not, is one of the most emotionally loaded areas of life. It's not just numbers. It's identity. It's security. It's comparison. It's pressure. It's expectations, both from yourself and from the people around you. So when you open your bank account, you're not just looking at a balance. You're looking at a reflection. And sometimes, that reflection doesn't match the version of your life you had in your head. That's where the discomfort begins. Because there's often a gap between where you think you should be and where you actually are. Maybe you thought you'd have more saved by now. Maybe you expected things to feel more stable. Maybe you assumed that by this point in your life, money wouldn't feel this stressful. And when reality doesn't match those expectations, it creates tension. Not loud tension. Subtle tension, the kind that makes you hesitate before opening an app, the kind that makes you delay something that should take 10 seconds. And here's where it gets interesting. Avoidance isn't just about fear, it's about protection. Your brain is trying to protect you from a negative emotional experience. It's saying, if we don't look, we don't have to feel that. No disappointment, no guilt, no stress, just temporary peace. But the problem is, that peace comes at a cost. Because while you're avoiding the feeling, you're also avoiding the information. And without information, you can't make clear decisions. So what starts as a small emotional avoidance turns into something bigger. You stop tracking where your money is going. You become less aware of your spending. You start making decisions based on assumptions instead of reality. And slowly, without realizing it, you lose a bit of control. Not all at once, just gradually. This is why avoidance is so deceptive. It doesn't feel like a major problem in the moment. It feels like relief. You close the app, and for a second, you feel better. But that relief is temporary, because the underlying situation hasn't changed. If anything, it's becoming more uncertain. Now let's go a little deeper, because avoidance around money isn't just about numbers being low. Some people avoid checking their bank account even when they're doing okay financially. And that tells you something important. This isn't just about how much money you have. It's about your relationship with it. For some people, money is tied to self-worth. If the number is low, it doesn't just mean, I have less money. It feels like, I'm not doing well. Or worse, I'm not doing enough. So instead of confronting that feeling, the brain chooses distance. Because distance feels safer than judgment. For others, it's about unpredictability. Maybe income is inconsistent. Maybe expenses fluctuate. Maybe things just feel uncertain. And when something feels unpredictable, checking it doesn't feel empowering. It feels stressful, like opening a message you're not ready to read. There's also the role of past experiences. If you've ever gone through a period where money was tight, where checking your account always led to stress, that feeling can stick. Even when your situation improves, your brain remembers. So now, even if things are better, that old association is still there. Checking equals stress. so you avoid. And then there's something even more subtle. Decision fatigue. Because when you open your bank account, it's not just about observing. It often leads to decisions. Should I cut back? Did I spend too much? Can I afford this? Do I need to fix something? And if you're already mentally tired, those questions feel heavy. So your brain chooses the easier option, not looking. But here's the part that really matters. Avoidance doesn't remove the problem. It amplifies it over time, because the longer you stay disconnected from your financial reality, the harder it becomes to face it. Not because the numbers are necessarily worse, but because the uncertainty grows. And uncertainty is what creates anxiety. Think about it this way. A clear, uncomfortable truth is easier to deal with than a vague, unknown one. If you know exactly where you stand, you can make a plan. You can adjust. You can respond. But when you don't know, your mind fills in the gaps, and it usually fills them with worst-case scenarios. That's why avoidance often creates more stress than the thing you're avoiding. It turns something concrete into something abstract, something manageable into something overwhelming. So what's the turning point? It's not forcing yourself to suddenly become perfect with money. It's not checking your account every hour. It's something much simpler. It's changing how you interpret what you see. Because right now, for many people, checking their bank account feels like judgment, like a test they might fail. But it's not a test. It's feedback, neutral information, data. It doesn't define you. It just informs you. And that shift, seeing it as information instead of judgment, changes the emotional experience. Because information is useful, judgment is heavy. Once you make that shift, something interesting happens. The resistance starts to decrease, not instantly, but gradually, because you're no longer associating the action with a negative identity. You're just observing. And from there, you can build something small, not a perfect system, just a simple habit. Maybe you check your account once a day for a few seconds. Not to analyze everything, just to stay aware. Awareness is powerful, because when you're aware, your decisions naturally improve. You don't need extreme discipline. You just need visibility. Over time, that visibility creates something else, confidence. Not because everything is perfect, but because nothing feels hidden anymore. And when nothing feels hidden, money stops feeling like this unpredictable force in the background. It becomes something you can understand, something you can manage, something that doesn't control your emotions the way it used to. Now, this doesn't mean you'll never feel discomfort around money again. That's not realistic. There will always be moments where things feel tight, uncertain, or frustrating. But the difference is, you won't avoid them. You'll face them earlier, when they're still manageable. And that changes everything. Because most financial stress doesn't come from one big event. It comes from small things that go unnoticed for too long. So if you find yourself avoiding your bank account, you don't need to judge yourself for it. You don't need to force some extreme change. You just need to understand what's happening. Your brain is trying to protect you. It's just using a strategy that doesn't work long-term. And once you see that clearly, you can choose something different. Not perfectly, not all at once, just slightly. Maybe the next time you think about checking your account, you don't overthink it. You just open it. Look for a few seconds and close it. No pressure, no analysis, just awareness. Because the goal isn't to feel good every time you look. The goal is to remove the fear of looking. And once that fear starts to fade, you'll notice something shift. Money stops feeling like something you're avoiding and starts feeling like something you're handling, quietly, consistently, without unnecessary stress. And over time, that changes your entire relationship with it. Not because your situation suddenly becomes perfect, but because you're no longer disconnected from it. And that connection, that awareness, is where real financial control begins. Not in big decisions, not in perfect strategies, but in small, consistent moments of honesty. So if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's simple. Avoidance feels like relief in the moment, but clarity is what actually reduces stress over time. And the moment you choose clarity, even in a small way, you're already moving in a different direction. One that feels a little more grounded, a little more stable, a little more in control. And that's how it starts. Not with a big breakthrough, but with a quiet decision to look, to understand, and to stop letting the unknown control how you feel about your money. Because once you remove the fear of seeing your reality, you can finally start shaping it. And that's where real progress begins.